Hi everyone, welcome along. It's Jonathan Corrie from Precursive once again on our podcast from a very hot and sunny day in London in the middle of a heat wave. I'm glad to be joined by an old friend of mine, Guy Marsh. Say hi, Guy.
Hello all.
Thanks for taking the time to join us, Guy. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role, if you don't mind, to begin with.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I've been working in resource management for about 12 years now. Started off at Hewlett Packard, very much a role which didn't exist, so I had to kind of make my own way as we went along. I think it's an interesting dynamic which has evolved over time where people didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
And now has become an integral part of the business, which is supported by obviously technology such as yours, Jonathan, Precursive. So yeah, was at HP for 5 years and progressed up from UK and I resource manager up to EMEA and then worldwide. Then moved on to Vodafone, embedded a similar thing that I did at HP, which is the fundamental practice of resource management, and again started UK and then spread that out to worldwide, covering their core hub locations. Then I took a little turn into the consultant arena, and I really wanted to get more exposure to different areas. So rather than big blue chip corporates, I wanted to see how this could be kind of embedded in a different environment. And so I worked for some tech startups, as well as the legal sector, which was very different in terms of the way that they operate. For a little anecdote with that is that I asked them to fill out a skills capability matrix to all the lawyers in the firm. I won't mention the firm's name.
Yeah.
So it was just a very basic Excel spreadsheet for them to fill out and send back to me.
Yeah.
Out of 120, probably about 30 of them filled it out in pen, gave it to their PA, who took a photo and then sent it back to me on a picture on email. So that gives you probably a bit of insight into the different mindsets and different organizations that I work with. So very different from the more sort of technical one, where I'm at now, which is Shell, and they're very switched on. I'm working there, obviously their IT department for part of the business called IT engineering. So I had quite a varied experience in resource management from its kind of origins 12 years ago to now. So I've seen the various changes.
Yeah. Well, Shell being one of obviously the world's largest companies, but also one of the largest IT organizations in the world. I didn't tell you, but in my old days back at CEB, what is now Gartner, I was working with Shell and their IT team. So I think at the time it was a £5 billion budget or something like that.
Yeah, it's around that now as well.
Is it? Okay.
Taken a little bit of a hit from COVID. They slashed it a little bit the last few months, but it's still significant. And I didn't know myself. I joined in January, and I wasn't fully aware of the scale of it until being part of the business. Obviously, I've worked for some big companies before, but Shell is a behemoth.
Yeah, it's enormous. Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks ever so much. So we're all living in working and living in a very different world. Obviously, I'm in my office that's getting hotter. You've got your it's a lovely Farrow and Ball-esque background you've got there, mate.
Yeah. It's
I like the elephant picture is really nice.
Well, my partner, her mother, before it went bust, worked in Laura Ashley, so it's pretty much head to floor to ceiling. Laura Ashley's house. Yeah.
So
there we are.
We talk about, I mean, on this show, we talk a lot about the new remote reality. So tell us a little bit about how you guys at Shell and you and your team have adapted to this changing environment.
Well, I think it's probably been slightly less impactful than it would have done perhaps in other businesses that I've worked for, but predominantly because the team that works under me is split across 4 locations. So India, the Netherlands and Houston. So we're all used to working quite remotely, but I think those individual groups are very much used to working together in their hub offices. So whereas before, at least there was some interaction, now it's been obviously very difficult because we as a group have only formed the part of the business that I'm part of, which is enterprise resource management, at January. So people hadn't really had a chance to get to know each other that well until obviously the implications of coronavirus hit. So just as teams were bonding and forming relationships and able to kind of share knowledge. I think that's been the key noticeable impact, is that we've had to utilize things like Teams to make sure that the learning space where we can all exchange ideas and share, learnings and experiences that we've had. And I think there has been a conscious effort to actually do some sort of semi-social stuff where possible. I think everyone lived and done about 20 quizzes during the height of Corona, and obviously we tried to incorporate a few things like that just to make sure the team felt connected. So I think from a team management perspective, that's been challenging.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, I think it's brought on, you kind of learn a lot about individuals and how they cope with adversity, and I think that's been really useful experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more. You almost get a lot more insight into people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of your peers and a lot of the people that we work with, they're trying to separate out those conversations that they're having around, business stuff, and then just like personal stuff of like, are you okay? Are you happy?
Exactly.
Because a lot of the time people are just all they've got to do is work, right? They can get up in the morning and start work and not stop until they go to bed. So yeah, I think that's a lot of people have to
I think there's been a conscious effort from someone like Shell, and I'm sure other employers as well, is to kind of understand the mental health implications as well, especially at the height of the pandemic, where we haven't been able to really leave the house for much more than a walk once a day. And the impact that has on people's different kind of situations. Some people don't have
yeah, for those listening and not watching, that was Guy's partner crawling through the hallway, and your new baby, who's how old now?
So the nursery is just there. And obviously this is what we're doing. This is a makeshift study. That used to be the study. Obviously it's got a higher need now. So just moved it along we have a very long hallway before we go up to the top. So yeah, so as we were saying about working from home, I think everybody's got different situations. Some people are stuck inside the whole time, other people have got kids. My partner's also working, so it was really challenging in that she was working part-time, but it's still 3 days a week, and there's no nursery. So it's trying to juggle, a meeting, pressing priorities, adjusting to that, working later, working earlier. One great thing is there's no commute, but I think one of the key things that we've taken from it is the need to kind of check in on people, make sure they're all right, but also the reliance on technology. You realize quite how mobile we are and fluid we are in terms of location. We aren't chained by the traditional sense of being in an office 9 till 5, and are much more adaptable now. And I think that's probably one of the best things that's come out of it. I'm going to be trying to push that, more and more where possible, that we're not restricted in that way. So it's good. It's really encouraging.
Okay, so if we move into sort of more like a deeper view of like the resource management area to begin with, I mean, I want to come back to like how the dynamics of like the staff has changed, but maybe if we just start with like a resource management 101. So like for those that perhaps don't do this in their businesses right now and are seeing some capacity issues, explain to us what is resource management?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple in concept. It's quite basically the demand that you have versus the capability of your resources, your people, versus the availability. Now, those are the three key components, and you can't have one without the other. You need to know what's coming in, you need to know who can do that, and you need to know when they can do that. So I think where traditionally that has been done at a kind of siloed level, small teams, and they would manage it. Now it's done on a lot more of a broader scale, in which we are heavily reliant on technology to get that wholesale view of what's happening, and then that's linked to cost and profitability. And from the kind of board level, executive level down, they need to understand what the demand means. If there's a change in that demand, what's the what if factors? How would they cope? What would they need to do? Because obviously that then has an impact on recruitment, on training, on upskilling. So resource management really is like the key kind of nerve center for being able to decide what you need, how you need, and what you need to do. So it's that it's that fundamental source of information that allows you to make intelligent decisions and, in essence, get the most effective use out of your workforce, your staff, in essence.
Okay.
So those are the kind of basic guiding principles around it.
Yeah, it sounds easy. It's very, very difficult
Yeah.
to achieve, as we both know.
Theoretically, it is very, very basic, but once you scale up and once you include different time zones, once you include specific restrictions with government projects, certain clearances, etc.,
Yep.
it becomes a very, very it's something that can easily get out of hand if you don't have the right systems and processes in place to underpin it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hence why we're in business, and we
Yeah.
worked together before, right? So, but you talked a little bit about some of those key areas of it, of demand and supply and availability. Let's just like unpack some of these key components a little bit more, right? So
Okay.
what kind of separates kind of like good from great resourcing teams, or frankly bad from good teams?
Yeah.
What are
Well,
the
let's take it from the first one.
Yeah, okay.
Then, so let's say demand. So I think the key for demand, or in essence, what you're selling,
Yeah.
is understanding a degree of predictability about it. So if you as a business know that your run rate on, say, certain products is you convert 8 out of 10 of those prospective deals into getting them over the line in a certain area, then you can start planning for that in terms of your resources. You know that I will need largely X amount of project managers, etc. Balance that out against what you currently have, and then make decisions accordingly. So the key for demand is getting a early snapshot of it. So forward looking, the longer term, the better, because the more time you've got to execute and plan accordingly. So I think that is a crucial part. Now, what also happens, and what was a scenario that I faced when I was at Vodafone, is you had demand come in from 6, 7, 8 different 9 channels, because Vodafone is a business that is largely based on acquisition, all using different systems. So not used to being an integrated view. So having one, and the project we've done there, one single interface, and the project was called Single Front Door. So the one funnel where all demand goes in. So you're capturing everything, because again, not having that complete view, making plans on the assumption that you do, and then 2 or 3 big deals come in out of nowhere, then that puts all your planning out the window, or at least has a significant impact on it. So a single interface, I would say, for demand is key, as well as a clear idea of what your success rate is for winning deals, and also then a clear view in terms of, as long as you can, in terms of projected timelines, get that forward look as to when it's happening. So I appreciate as well that with sales there's a degree of unpredictability, but I think if you can get at the moment in Shell, there's an acceptance that with some of the areas, if we move that to at least sort of 50-60%, that's acceptable. You're never going to get 100, but if you work within the parameters of the areas which you are, and define what a degree of success is, then you kind of move back from there. And if the improvements can be made and further refined, but I think it's important to have a base level as to where to strive to in terms of that predictability, so that you can, again, when you're looking at what your availability is in terms of resources versus your demand, you know roughly what the margin of error is and can make calculated assessments.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. One follow-up question would be, talk about the lead time, right? Planning as far ahead in advance. Is there any, in your experience, ratio between, or things for people to think about between, so for example, between the lead time and the sort of the complexity of the work, or anything like that? So for example, if you're delivering X type of work, you want to be planning for that X weeks or months in advance. Have you ever thought about that or looked at that?
Yes, I think it's industry dependent. Truthfully, I don't think there's a one size fits all. So I think with the legal sector, it's a very reactive. It's very difficult to predict. So, for example, a number of people could be working towards being assigned a litigation piece of work that would involve maybe 20 resources to start working from the moment the client says go. But quite often that will be settled prior to getting to that place. So it's a very difficult scenario to have to sort of soft book people, which is a large team for a period of time, which are almost going to be a year, 2 years working on that case, to suddenly you've got a new problem in that you've got a surplus of resources available. And in the legal sector, obviously, they're the high overhead cost for them, burning cash. So you then suddenly need to rehome them. And one of the challenges again with that is that in their minds, they've all got a very clear career trajectory and all want to work on specific cases, and to sort of be scrabbling around to find them something else to do that is both profitable to the business, that isn't going to commit them for 2 years of their career, and that ultimately the associate partners are happy to take them on, which might not be their area of expertise. That's a challenge in itself. So those sudden sort of curveballs, shall we say, or changes of anticipated demand have kind of impact both on the business's profitability and the individuals. Because when we're talking about resources, I think quite often it's forgotten. We're actually discussing human beings who have got careers, who've got lives, who, you know, it might be, especially in a consultant environment, someone who would have been working in, say, South London, where they were pretty close to where they live, and now it's changed, that project's cancelled, or something hasn't, you know, it hasn't got signed over the line, and now they're working in Knutsford for Barclays Bank, you know, and it's a huge impact on their lifestyle. They could have kids, and I think that's something which, again, sometimes gets lost in the myriad of data when we analyze, and it's important to kind of retain that human element and understand that.
I think that's changing, right? I certainly think, you know, since you and I worked together previously, and really, I would imagine over the years in your career, you've seen that evolution where the human element is becoming much more important to companies.
Yeah.
And
in theory, at least, yeah.
In theory, absolutely. I mean, this leads us on to like what makes a good resource manager, because a lot of the time it sounds like in your experience, in your role, you're as much kind of, you know, managing the expectations and engaging with people and communicating with people and getting them bought in. So it sounds like there's quite a broad range of skills that's needed. What types of things make a good resource manager?
So I think I'll talk about myself here in the first instance, but I think reason I've sustained a career in resource management is I think it's being able to empathize, because resource management is like spinning plates. You have to keep them going around, and you've got competing interests a lot of the time. So I think being able to empathize, understand that when a project manager is sometimes forcefully demanding a resource of a certain ilk, you've got to understand what the driving factors are from him as an individual. Is his project over budget? Is he really tight on timelines? Has he, you know, got a very demanding client? So it's being able to both understand their needs, empathize, but also be able to deliver bad news that isn't always the outcome that they want, but with an alternative. So I think it's broken down into 3 key areas. So I think stakeholder engagement is absolutely key, because you're the interface between the resource and the demand owner. So you need to be able to manage both the demand owner's expectations, also be able to empathize in what the urgency is for them, what the pressures they are under and the challenges they're facing. Some clients are particularly difficult to work with, and I think having that awareness of also what the project is delivering arms you with enough information to make an educated kind of, I suppose guess is the wrong word, but an educated assessment as to how best to deal with this situation, because every project manager or program manager thinks their project is the most important. So being able to process all the information, look at the data, and make an informed decision as to what is the most pressing priority and is the most overall beneficial decision for the business is key. So stakeholder management key. Being able to process and assess individual information quickly, and also being able to analyze data, I think are the 3 components. So you've got your kind of instinct, your human element, where you have to deal with the stakeholders. You need to underpin what your instincts are by using supporting data, and you need to be able to, I think, be quite thick-skinned and robust in the way that you work at times, whilst also being flexible to changing demands. There are processes, and we all should strive to follow them, but at times we can't be a slave to them, and they need to be bended slightly to make sure that we're focusing on outcomes and aren't just a computer says no sort of blocker to the business.
Yeah, Yeah, well, I think too often people are viewed as a commodity, right?
Hmm.
And therefore, not necessarily as an asset. And so if you're deploying your assets, you want to ensure that, that you're doing it in such a way that is not only making best use of them, but also,
Hmm.
has a significant impact in value for the client, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think that, sometimes when things are chaotic and there aren't the processes and systems to support it, you get a bums on seats mentality, right? And that's where this goes wrong. How have you? I mean, so how have you seen in this new remote reality? How have you seen the dynamics of staffing and resourcing change now? Are you seeing, the need for different things given the environment that we work in? How is it evolving?
I think there's been, especially at the moment, there's been an acceptance that people need to be flexible, both resources and those requesting the resources. Um, One of the key aspects is understanding that they're not going to get perfect in this instance. I want someone with skills A, B, C, and D. It could be that they've got A, B, and C, and they need to maybe have a bit of a knowledge transfer on D, and that is something where that is good for ups and for the business because we're upskilling in an area which we need, which there's a shortage. Um, and the demand owner understands that there are limitations in terms of where the budgets are. So where perhaps previously it might have been, well, we'll get a con that was probably easier to get approval for. Now there's probably more scrutiny on, well, let's actually find another way to work that is more aligned to actually using our staff better,
Mm.
training them up more, and is ultimately going to save us money because contractors in essence are more expensive and aren't going to be there in most cases for the long term. So you're not actually developing your talent pool, and you don't have that capability afterwards. Whereas obviously an internal person, you're giving them development and you're expanding the capabilities within your own staff.
Yeah, we ran our, as you know, you were involved in the research a number of years ago, the agile workforce research. One
Hmm.
of the things that we were exploring was this idea that really this is a talent management. Like, you shouldn't even call it resource management. You should call
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
and when you view it through that lens, you'll ultimately think about it in a different way and act on it a different way in a business. Why do you think, like, why in your world is skills so important? I'd imagine they're absolutely critical to both your internal
Yeah,
stakeholders and your customers, right? I would have
I,
thought.
I think it goes back to, as I said, the sort of three key pillars of resource management. If you've got demand, you need to be able to fulfill it. If you don't aren't aware of the capabilities of your workforce, then how do you know that you can when you can deliver it, how it's going to be done, or is it going to be on time? You're making promises to your customers that you simply can't keep if you don't have that kind of inventory of what your people can do.
Yeah,
So it's critical that you have a system which allows you, from a high level view, as me as a lead of a department, to understand that I have X amount of people with Azure skills, for example. I
yeah,
can marry that up against the demand that we've got coming in, and obviously balance that against the availability to see, do we need, are our workforce plans on the recruitment side of things, are they going to meet the demands of the business? So making sure we have up to date, clear skills matrix for each and every resource or talent, as we'll say, in the business is absolutely critical. It allows us the ability to speak to our clients with confidence that we can say, if you sign here, we can deliver that by then.
mm,
It's as
yeah,
simple as that. We have the people already waiting to go, not sign here and we're reacting to, we suddenly need to get someone, and is that a contract, is that not? And also certain skills are very, very niche and difficult to engage in the market. So if we don't know that we need them because we're not aware of what our own capabilities are, then we are suddenly going to the market and asking for them to pull, rabbits out of hats.
yeah.
And again, that's a very costly way of doing things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so when we talk about some of these different components, so you've got the demand forecasting, you've
Hmm.
got the resource management, so the prioritization,
the allocation, right?
Allocation, and the actual scheduling of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sounds like off the back of that, really, when you think about the workforce planning, that is very much future capacity, hiring, contract market. That's how you make that distinction, is it? When you think about
I think it's probably workforce planning is more related specifically to, in Shell at least, permanent recruitment. So this is what we need in terms of, we made this decision based on all that information that you've just said. We are confident enough that we have enough work to support requisitions for permanent hires. So the other areas are that comes as a byproduct of doing those stages that you spoke about in the preliminaries. So this is our demand. This is what we're doing. We are now reviewing and actually realizing we've got 20 contractors all working in this space, and we have had for the last 2 years. So we feel confident enough to make a commitment to hire 5 of those permanently now. Still want the contract workforce to allow flexibility to a changing landscape and dealing with things like Corona. You need that in your workforce, but we're confident enough that these skills are in such demand that we can commit to offering people permanent positions that we want to grow and develop in the business.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Well, listen, Guy, super interesting. One final, I think, brain teaser, and this is slightly from left field. So one of the things that we, as you know, we work a lot with customers who are trying to implement a platform strategy from a technology perspective. They have Salesforce, they plug Precursive into that, and they're typically managing their commercial activities in Salesforce, and then resourcing and project management and capacity planning and all of this type of work in Precursive, as you know. Now, one of the things I talk about is like that sometimes sales can be very one-dimensional, right? We have a sales pipeline, it's X amount in value. And for many organizations, there isn't a lot more detail than that, right? It's like, we've got this deal pending. And whereas your world is, as you've described it, is very, very three-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you say, the what, the who, and the when, right? And that's you know, one can be quite sort of static, and one can be very, very liquid. How do you know, in your experience, is automation and that single platform piece, is that one of the ways that you can solve that riddle? Because for many businesses, that's really what they struggle with. It's like looking at that and then looking at this and trying to marry the two.
What I think is one of the ways that we're looking at moving forward is reuse, right? So when we know that there's a project, and a lot of projects, so ignoring those that are so bespoke, but there's a lot of standard activities and projects that are reusable in terms of both the timeframes and the resource model. So if we know that we are delivering X, previously that required 1 project manager, 2 techies, and 1 PMO, for example. So what we're working towards is having that. It's almost like a job description. You input that into Salesforce. You want to achieve this outcome. These are the resources that you need. So it's that AI that comes in, and then it all flows through the system. So I suppose it's what we're working towards is getting that embedded over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, where we've got the repository of history of how we've delivered. We use that with the AI that then computes and tells us what is then the impact on our resources, and that jumps us a few steps ahead in terms of what actions we should take. Now there's a short-term look at it, and it says these are the resources you'll need short-term. This is the longer term for these projects. These are the various avenues we can go down. So day-to-day operational resource management side of things, that shouldn't change so much. It should just be that it cuts out the need for us asking a sales guy to engage with an architect, for example, to solutionize what and put some resource estimates together. That should be, in most cases, I think about 70% we should be looking at a standardized way of working, a standardized resource team that is required. And then again, we're in that much better position where we understand longer term, if we, as I've said before, we've got 100 projects, we know that we got an 80% success rate. So 80 of these projects are going to be getting over the dotted line, and we'll need a resource impact. We've now got to that next level where these projects are, say 70% of them, so are requiring these teams to deliver.
Yeah.
That then tags in again as what we said. These are our capabilities. These are our existing availabilities based on those dates. Where are the deltas? What do we need to do? What strategy do we put in place based on this information? So that AI is becoming and will become a major, I suppose, the next step in the kind of evolution of resource management. And I think, I hope it doesn't get too advanced, because I might be out of a job if it carries on at this rate. But in the way that it, I think it changes the role, rather than having to create the data and spend a lot of time, gathering information. It's slightly different from one area. It gathers it for you and allows you to put a strategy in place and tactical solutions, rather than, I think but before was working for businesses that had 5 different data sources that had different terminology, which didn't have any sort of cohesive view on their resources. So, and what was required. So I think the AI will look to resolve that, and again allow us to, allow the people, the smart people at the top, to make decisions on what they need to do a lot more ahead of the curve than perhaps what they're doing now. So a lot less reactionary.
It's interesting, because that's very much in line. It was good to hear, because it's validating what we're advising our clients on. We tell them, look, think about the 80%. Think about the when you look at a company's portfolio of work, what you've just described is bang on. Is that there's a proportion of that work which is more vanilla, right? Whether it's 50%, 60%, 70%, the mechanics of how you deliver it is the same. Typically, in terms of the way the project plan and the things that you do, and the staffing model or the resource plan, it's repeatable. So it's those repeatable, we call them playbooks, the repeatable playbooks for project management, for resource management. Because if you can automate a lot of that, right? You can say, look, like you say, we got 100 projects. We know that 80 of them will close. We know that of that, X percentage are going to be vanilla. Therefore, we can create those templates automatically. And as you say, you wouldn't be out of a job, because what you'd be doing is looking at the way more complex stuff in more detail, with more time, with more care, right? And making that run better, because very often that work is the higher contract value, higher margin work, which if it goes wrong, that's a real disaster zone, not if you lose a bit of cash on some of this run rate stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the mindset that people like. I think they sort of set themselves up to worry about the top tier too much, and they should start from the bottom and work out, how do we get this run rate stuff to go as quickly and easily as possible, and can be managed by, frankly, a lower level of staff with a lower cost base, with tech enabling that. And then the top tier is facilitated more than anything else by people like your good self. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and what's really encouraging for me is it seems to be that, as I say, from seeing the initial growth of resource management, of joining at the very offset and how it's developing, it's encouraging that we're getting to that it's progressing in a very much technological way now. We're moving away from emails and Excel spreadsheets and just being a very reactionary kind of business. We're looking to add value in a way that definitely hasn't been implemented in other businesses before. And I think that, as I said before, the kind of AI that is coming into play to support that, and definitely at Shell, that's where we're going. It's really exciting to be part of a business that's so progressive in that way. If we look back in 2 years from now, 2 years time, we'll see a massive difference between now and then. I can really see it changing the way that we operate massively, and I think it's progressing quicker now and than it has done over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I think there's a value. I think people see the value of it more now. I think maybe not the last 5 years, say 10 years ago, people didn't really understand it. I was quite often going into, especially when I was consulting, and especially in certain sectors, legal sector, as I said, there was an Excel based challenges there, but people really understand why it's happening, why they need it, and how it better supports the profitability of their business.
100%.
You're getting more out of your resources for you're getting a more effective use of your resources. You're understanding them. You can reduce attrition rates. There's many benefits to resource management. It's
100%.
just getting it underpinned by the right tooling so you can see it.
Very good, sir. Thank you ever so much for joining us, Guy. Much appreciated.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right. Take care.
All the best. Thanks, Jonathan. Bye.
Yes, bye.